Right now, I'm challenging myself to see if I can make 128 Regulation H teams that are each different from one another over the course of 128 days. Why 128, you might ask? At the end of the 128 days, we're going to do something special where we battle every team against each other in a single elimination bracket to see which team emerges on top. There will be some competitively strong teams, there will be some gimmick teams, and there will be some probably a good number of goofs and gaffs in there, so if you want to follow through to the end, subscribe so that you can keep up with each day. But without further ado, let's move on to day 126. Alright everybody, welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be going over a Mold Breaker team. Now, Mold Breaker is a pretty unique ability in Pokemon, because what Mold Breaker allows you to do is that whenever you are using your moves, they will be able to ignore the abilities of the Pokemon that are on the opposite side of the field. And usually when I hear this come to mind, I immediately think of like using a ground type move into a levitate Pokemon like Rotom that really needs its ability in order to prevent it from being hit from a super effective attack. But there's also more simple uses, like you can use priority moves into Pokemon that have Armor Tail, Dazzling, or Queenly Majesty. And you can click status moves like Thunder Wave into Pokemon that have like Good as Gold on Goldango, and also Purifying Assault on Garganacl. But today I've got 3 of the Mold Breaker Pokemon, being Basculegion Female, Tinkaton, and Haxorus, and some of these Pokemon have a little bit of play into the other ones, in the sense that we mostly want to get Superior going, but we'll go over Superior when we get there. For now, we're going to talk about Basculegion Female, and the nice thing about being Basculegion Female is that we are a special attacker, so we get more damage on our Muddy Water, and whenever we click the Muddy Water, we will not be missing out on damage into Pokemon with Water Absorb or Storm Drain, which is pretty notable because Pokemon like Gastrodon love to terastallize into fire, and because of their Storm Drain ability, they'll have an immunity to water, but we can ignore that with Basculegion. So if we can pressure a Terra on those Pokemon, then we can bring in Basculegion and then hit them. Kind of same with Shadow Ball here. Again, Purifying Salt, I guess, pops up and is an ability that would also be ignored with the Shadow Ball, but Shadow Ball is also a ball move, so we can ignore the Bulletproof on Pokemon if they were to have that, and then Aqua Jet will also ignore priority ignoring abilities and also water ignoring abilities, so a lot of ignoring going on. And to increase our damage on Basculegion Female, we have the Mystic Water, which will give us more damage on our Muddy Water and our Aqua Jet. And we are the Terra Flying type, so that we can resist Grass, but also so that we can dodge Ground, because not a lot of things on this team deal with Ground that well. Next up on the team, we have Tinkaton, and Tinkaton has the move Fake Out, and since we are Mold Breaker, of course, we can use that into Pokemon that would ignore priority, but it also means that we can actually flinch Pokemon that have abilities that wouldn't allow them to be flinched, such as Inner Focus. And this Tinkaton is more support-orientated, as we have the Encore in order to try and lock the opponent into something like a Protect or a Fake Out, and since we're Mold Breaker, we can ignore things like Good as Gold that would stop the status move from affecting them, or Sweet Veil or Aroma Veil. I think it's Aroma Veil, actually, that ignores the taunts. I think Sweet Veil is for sleep. And then we also have the Thunder Wave for a bit of speed control, and we have the signature move Gigaton Hammer, just to do that big steel type damage for whatever we need it. And we are the Safety Goggles, mostly so that we are not getting put to sleep by things that have Sleep Powder moves, but also so that we can ignore Rage Powder redirection on a Tinkaton is pretty important. Next up, we have our last Mold Breaker Pokemon, which is Haxorus, and Haxorus it's a dragon that it kind of has the same problem as most Mono-Psychics, in that most Mono-Psychics have a very wide move pool. Haxorus is a Mono-Dragon that has a very wide move pool, and I can't really think of another Pokemon that has this kind of same problem as Haxorus, except for maybe Druddigon. It's been a while since I've looked at Druddigon's move pool, but I think Druddigon still has at least enough to differentiate itself. Haxorus, his move pool is pretty vast, but its vast move pool doesn't really combo with its Mold Breaker all that well. Like, if we were to search, for example, for the Fire type moves that we have for ignoring Fire type abilities like Flash Fire, Sunny Day is our only Fire type move, and if we were to search our Water type moves, we do have the Aqua Tail, which
is at least an option. Let's look at the rest of Haxorus's water. Yeah, it's Aqua Tail. Oh, and Surf. Of course, Surf. You're not using Surf with Haxorus, not with that special attack stat. But I did at least try to pick out a few moves that Haxorus can use with its ability, that being the First Impression, and Terrabug will also make it so that we have a really hard-hitting First Impression into the opponent, and if it's Furgraph, then we also get a super effective First Impression, and it will think that it can ignore the priority, but it cannot, because we are the Mold Breaker. And then Earthquake, of course, as I mentioned before, is designed to ignore Pokemon that have the Levitate ability so that you can try and hit them for super effective damage, or at least neutral if it's a Pokemon that just wants the immunity with Levitate. And then we have our Stab Breaking Swipe that we can use to try and lower the attack stat of both of the opponent's Pokemon, so we can lower the attack of Pokemon that have Clear Body like Haxorus or Metagross. But Mold Breaker does not stop abilities like Defiant from activating, so if we click the Breaking Swipe into a Kingambit, then we're going to have a bad time. Which is really kind of the unfortunate thing about Mold Breaker, is that it does allow you to deal damage, but it doesn't negate the consequences of your actions sometimes. Also, just a little side tangent about Mold Breaker, but Mold Breaker, not only like is it an announced ability when it really doesn't need to be an announced ability, like I feel like it should stay secret, but the way Mold Breaker is announced is it doesn't really tell you what Mold Breaker does. It just says Mold Breaker breaks the mold. Like, what does that mean? if you were playing a Pokemon game for the first time and you saw that Mold Breaker breaks the mold, you would have no idea what this ability actually does. Like, at least whenever you set up Sunny Day, it sets up the sun and tells you that the sunlight intensifies. Or if you were to, like, activate Quark Drive, for example, it will tell you what kind of boost the opponent got off of the Quark Drive. Mold Breaker gets announced, and then it doesn't explain anything. Mold Breaker just breaks the mold. You need to know what that means in order to know why Mold Breaker is being announced. It's just so weird. Next up, we have Superior, and Superior is here simply because I wanted to pull off an interesting interaction that happens between Mold Breaker Pokemon and Contrary Pokemon, since obviously Mold Breaker ignores Contrary, but if a Mold Breaker Pokemon procs a weakness policy on a Contrary Pokemon, it will activate the weakness policy as normal. So as you saw, we have the First Impression on Haxorus in order to proc it into Superior's ground type. We also have the Aqua Jet on Basculation Female in order to proc it into the Superior's Terra ground type. And I decided to make this Superior Physical Superior because I wanted to go for the Pezzle Blizzard in order to try and get a lot of big spread damage. And we are using a Dragon and a Steel type, so we don't care too much on those Pokemon. If they get Petal Blizzard, Basculation Female and Golem can at least protect on the turns that we need to go for Petal Blizzard. Then we also have other physical moves in the knockoff, and then we can go for the Terra Blast, Terra Ground if we want to. But because if we proc the weakness policy and we get a special attack boost, we can also use the regular special attack Terra Blast outside of the Terastallization as just a normal move. Sometimes when the situation calls for it. Not super ideal, but possible. Next up we have Golem, who I wanted to put in here mostly so that I could have a bomb to try and pressure the opponent with. Because Golem is here to click the Terra Normal and then have our Normal Gem activate so that the next Normal type move will have a 1.3 times power boost. And then whenever we go for that explosion, it's pretty likely to KO both Pokemon even if they're neutral to it on the opposite side of the field. And a lot of the things on this team have Protect, or at least are Terra Steel or are regular Steel in order to resist the explosion. And since Golem is a sturdy, the opponent would have to attack into Golem at least twice or have some kind of multi-hitting move in order to get rid of Golem and cause the explosion not to activate. Or if the opponent just wants to double protect, we have the Bulldoze on option on Golem so that we can try and increase the Superior's speed for the next turn. Or if they double protect, then we can just have the Stomping Tantrum for some good general damage. Or if they try to fake out Golem in order to break the sturdy, then we still just have some consistent damage on Golem at least. And lastly, we can slot Hisuian Gudra onto the team, mainly because I wanted a Sapsipper Pokemon to combo with the fact that we are using Petal Blizzard on Superior, and Sapsipper will ignore Grass type moves and also raise our attack whenever we are hit by one, so it's kind of nice to have a Pokemon that can like Terastallize into water, and then we're only weak to Electric, and you really don't see Mold Breaker Pokemon that often, except for on this team, so Thankfully, we're probably not going to have our ability ignored on the Sap Sipper, but Sap Sipper also gives us another immunity to powder moves like Spore or Sleep Powder because they're also grass type. And then if we get that attack boost on Goodra, we can go for an increased damage on our Heavy Slam or Dragon Claw as our 2 stab moves. And then Ice Spinner is here mostly to try and get rid of the Psychic Terrain. Since our Mold Breaker Pokemon can ignore abilities that ignore priority, then we can Ice Spin away the Psychic Terrain, and then we'll have full control of our priority moves. And then lastly, we also slotted on the Acid Spray so that we can increase the damage of our special attackers, that just being Basculation and like technically superior sometimes with the Terra Blast. But also we can go for the side Acid Spray into superior in order to increase its special defense, but not when it's the grass type, because then if we do that, it'll proc the weakness policy and superior's attack will go down, and that would not be great. And then since all of our moves are attacking moves, we're using the Assault Vest on Goodra in order to further increase its already great special defense stat. But yeah, that's the basic gist of the team. Let's get into some battles. Alright, so recently Reg H Ladder actually came back, which was the main impetus for me recording this instead of recording something else, is that I also wanted to get done with 128 teams, even though it's been way too long for 128 teams. But we're coming up on the day that I uploaded the first day for 128 teams, and if I upload the last 3 videos in the next 3 days, then I will have uploaded roughly 1/3 of the year when it was supposed to be 128 days, but that's besides the point. So we're doing some real, actual best of 1 ladder matches here, not that I'm trying to gain any actual elo, just trying to show off how the team works. But this team obviously has the Sneasler and the Rillaboom for some fast grassy seed, and then it also has the Magmar for redirection for some of the heavier hitters like Dragonite and Goldango. So we see that the opponent leads Dragonite and Rillaboom here, as we lead Superior and Basculegion, and I was really hoping that they wouldn't lead Rillaboom. I was hoping that we would see either Incineroar or Magmar here, Incineroar notably so that we can get the contrary attack boost, and since all of our moves are physical, we can actually use that boost to try and deal damage into things. But they lead Rillaboom here, and they immediately swap it out into Sneasler in order to get their Grassy Seed procced, as I swap Basculegion into the Tinkaton, and I protect Superior because I thought maybe a U-turn would go into Superior, as Dragonite goes for the Scale Shot, but Tinkaton is Fairy. Rillaboom returns to the field as Superior goes for the Terra Ground, and we fake out Dragonite, since even if Dragonite was in our focus, we could still flinch it there with Tinkaton's fake out. Dire Claw comes into Superior, but now we are ground type, so we resist it, and thankfully we don't get a secondary effect. And we Terra Blast them back for some good damage on the Sneasler. Sneasler decides to go for the Protect on the next turn, as we also protect with Superior. And we try to Gigaton Hammer to pick off Sneasler, and they try to Wood Hammer in order to pick off Superior, but neither of those things happen. Now we get to bring in Goodra, who catches the Grass type move and activates the Sap Sipper, and of course Dire Claw is not able to hurt Goodra as a Steel type. And we get the nice para onto Sneasler there as Sneasler protects, and we try Gigatoning, hammering into it again, but don't get it. But Rillaboom U-turns out into Dragonite here as we target Dragonite with the Ice Spinner, which is going to get rid of the grassy terrain. Also deal a lot of damage into Dragonite, and here the opponent just decides to forfeit. We unfortunately don't get to see their last spawn, but based on the play, I think we were pretty good there to wrap up. Because, like, basically all of them are still at full health, and we've got their Sneasler paralyzed and Dragonite down, and Rillaboom can return to the field, sure, but we're just gonna Ice Spinner its terrain back away. Up next, we have one of those types of snow teams that doesn't really synergize with the snow, it just really enjoys the bulk of the Aurora Veil, and then dealing a lot of hyper-offensive pressure. The game starts out and lead Superior and Golem, as they lead Gyarados and the Ninetales. So not super great for Golem, as they could just Blizzard and then Waterfall into Golem, and that would be the end of Golem. But they at least do give us the Intimidate attack boost on the Superior. We see Goodra swap out here as Superior goes for the Protect, and we do see the Blizzard come out from the Ninetales, and Waterfall does do a little bit more damage than I would like to Goodra, but still not that we can survive it in the next turn. Here we go for Petal Blizzard, just because I wanted to maybe try and sack Superior to the Blizzard, or if Ninetales didn't go for the Blizzard on the next turn. Thankfully it did swap out, so we get good Petal Blizzard damage there into Goodra, and a little bit chip on Magmar, and we get to activate our +1 on Gudra. They taunt Gudra for whatever reason. Not sure what they expected it to do. Maybe Iron Defense, I think is pretty likely. But Heavy Slam does some decent damage to Magmar. We use our Terra Ground in order to take out the Magmar. As Gyarados goes for the Terra Flying. And then we get to take out Gyarados with our Dragon Claw. And then the opponent decides to forfeit. Because even if it was like Garchomp in the back and then Ninetales, they would still have a rough uphill battle because we have Golem in the back, and Golem can maybe go boom. Here we have a pretty classic hard Trick Room set up, and we also have somebody who has a custom icon, so I really didn't want to lose to this person. Not that I hate people with custom icons, it's just, custom icons scare me a little bit. But the game starts out and we lead Basculegion and Gudra into Hatterene and Ursaluna, interestingly enough, as Indeedee is actually the one to swap on the field who is going to catch the Shadow Ball because it is immune to it, but we deal good heavy slam damage into Indeedee as Ursaluna goes for the substitute and gets burned there. I decided to protect Basculegion, but I think that this play is always wrong just because I wanted to... What I thought they were going to do is follow me with Indeedee and then try and get off an Earthquake with Ursaluna, but since the Ursaluna is substitute, it means that they can only have Earthquake or Headlong Rush, because they always need Facade or Protect because they're on Trick Room team. But here we get the Ice Spinner into Indeedee in order to remove the terrain, as Headlong Rush is going to remove Gudra from the field, and Indeedee lives so it gets to set up the Trick Room, so we're in a pretty bad spot now. Golem is going to come in and try and turn this around as we Terraflying Basculegion to maybe catch the Headlong Rush that it would have to throw into it in order to KO it. And Golem is also sturdy, and Indeedee is not guaranteed to have an attacking move at this point. But Ursaluna actually reveals the Protect as Hatterene swaps in. We try to Stomping Tantrum in order to break the sub, and then click Muddy Water into Ursaluna to maybe KO it. But we do not get that. Basculegion is going to Protect again as we catch Dazzling Gleam on Golem from Hatterene. Golem is slower than Ursaluna, so it gets to Stomping Tantrum the Hatterene as Facade tries to KO Basculegion, and now there's only 2 turns left of Trick Room. So we actually see Ursaluna swap out here as we swap in Tinkaton, and unless the Ursaluna had decided to KO Golem, it was pretty smart for it to leave here, because what we do with Golem is we watch Glade Terra Grass, but we go for the Explosion with Golem to try and remove the sub, but now they get to set up their Psychic Terrain as we are forced to bring Basculin back onto the field. And now that there is only 1 turn of Trick Room left, we have a pretty safe endgame in the fact that Basculegion can go for the Protect, and even though Ursaluna is going to substitute in order to try and get another turn, we get to Gigaton that substitute in order to escape the Trick Room, and we can just Encore the Ursaluna into the substitute again in case the Muddy Water were to miss, but thankfully we do not miss it on the next turn. Alright, here we have another Sneasler Rillaboom with Dragonite for the offense, Mousehold for a little bit of redirection, maybe set up Volcarona and King Gambit. And we're going to see Sneasler and King Gambit as the lead into Tinkaton, and Haxorus gets to come onto the field this time, both revealing their Mold Breaker. Tinkaton unfortunately gets faked out, but I clicked Fake Out into the Sneasler because I want to click Earthquake, and Earthquake does a lot of damage obviously into Tinkaton, but did a lot more into the opponent there. King Gambit goes for the Sword Stance there, which is kind of unfortunate, as Close Combat is able to take out Tinkaton, but at least King Gambit used the Terra Dark there, so now we're in a bit of a game where we can Aqua Jet the King Gambit in order to deal damage into it, and Dark Claw does damage into Haxorus, as Breaking Swipe does damage into Sneasler and King Gambit, but it does activate the King Gambit's Defiant, but at this point we can't have King Gambit Sucker Punch anything. Unfortunately, Mousehold is the last Pokemon, and they just protect King Gambit and then decide to Population Bomb down the Haxorus there. And we also miss our Muddy Water on the Mousehold, which could have helped us with the accuracy drops on Population Bomb. We get the Aqua Jet damage there into Mousehold as King Gambit suckers into that slot, and at least we get to Heavy Slam damage down the Mousehold there. Volcarona comes onto the field and we protect King Gambit, but they correctly decide to Sucker Punch into the Gudra this time, and we can Aqua Jet King Gambit as they Sucker Punch, and then they Giga Drain Basculegion, but it would have been better if we could have used the Terra Flying on Basculegion there in order to try and resist the Volcarona's Giga Drain if we thought that we had it, because then we could survive for a little bit longer, but at this point, not super likely. I went for the Muddy Water there because I thought King Gambit would be fed up with the Sucker Punches, but evidently it wasn't. So what I think I could have done better in that game was try and use the Haxorus's first impression in order to take out the King Gambit, since Haxorus would have been faster than the King Gambit, and King Gambit couldn't Sucker Punch into Haxorus there. And then once that Pokemon was down, it would have given us a lot better ability to open up our Basculegion, just clicking Muddy Water into Volcarona in the endgame there. And lastly, we have a battle against a Tailwind Super Offense team with also Amoonguss for putting things to sleep. And the way that this plays out is that we lead Basculegion and Superior here as Talonflame and Garchomp hit the field. Basculegion breaks the mold. Superior is going to protect, not wanting to get a Flying type move into it, and Talonflame does throw the Flying type move, and Basculegion takes some damage from the Stomping Tantrum, but we get to KO Talonflame and deal some pretty good damage into Garchomp there with our Muddy Water. Here we swap in Haxorus as Superior fails the protect, as I forgot that I had protected on the previous turn, so that one was entirely on me. Should have gone into knockoff into Goldango on that turn, but we take a Dragon Claw basically for free there, as Goldango goes for the Nasty Plot. And since I took damage, I wanted to go for the first impression into Superior. Just for reference, the first impression into Superior does about 80%. Would not recommend it. But on turn 3 here, we see Goldango decide to Terastallize into a Fairy type. I'm not exactly sure why. Maybe just to flex. But Garchomp goes for the Dragon Claw, and we live on our Focus Sash. So Haxorus is going to get to do something, at least, as long as it's faster than Goldango. And that is getting off the Earthquake there, as both of my Pokemon are going to be KO'd by the Make It Rain from Goldango. But at least this means that Goldango's special attack goes down. And now that we have Tinkaton and Basculegion on the field, I predict that Goldango is going to protect so that it doesn't get faked out. And that is exactly what happens. So I actually fake out the Garchomp slot, which means we take a little bit of Rough Skin, but we get to Muddy Water with Garchomp. And our last Pokemon is revealed to be Amoonguss, thankfully. If it was the Samurott, we would probably lose, but since it is the Amoonguss, we get to just click the Gigaton Hammer into the Goldango, and we ignore the Rage Powder because we are safety goggles, and then we get a little bit of Shadow Ball Chip on Amoonguss, but at this point, Amoonguss probably cannot defeat Tinkaton, so the opponent just decides to forfeit there. So yeah, that was the Mold Breaker or Bust team, and admittedly I think Mold Breaker is not a great ability in doubles, mostly because whenever you're using it in singles, you want to be trying to hit Pokemon that normally could negate taking damage for an entire turn with their ability, but in doubles you have two Pokemon on the field, so you have two abilities to hit a Pokemon that would have an immunity because of its ability. And also the fact that Mold Breaker doesn't have any play into things like Intimidate for your physical attackers. You'd still have to be running a Clear Amulet, and it doesn't ignore being flinched by Fake Out. Makes it a lot harder to use Mold Breaker Mons in doubles, because those are very important things to be able to handle in doubles. Oh, and also the thing about the weakness policy on contrary mons, don't do this. This is just to tell you that it's happened, and it's kind of a funny thing that you can do. Don't do this. Oh, you know, on second thought, I just thought about the fact that I could have been using Neutralizing Gas Wheezing and then side-targeted like a Poison Sting or something into Superior, and then that would give me the weakness policy, and then after that, maybe another time. Maybe the next 128 teams will have that idea. I don't know. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked it, maybe consider leaving a like on the video and even consider subscribing, because both of those things help me out an absolute ton, and I will see you in the next one, which will 100% definitely be tomorrow. Thank you.